All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
I'm Garrett Bergquist, government reporter for Wish TV and the producer of All Indiana Politics. Destiny Wells, a Democrat, is challenging Republican Todd Rokita in his bid for a second term as Attorney General. You might remember Wells from her campaign for Secretary of State 2 years ago. She worked briefly as a Deputy Attorney General under then Attorney General Curtis Hill. Wells has sharply criticized Rokita's involvement in national-level lawsuits. She says it diverts resources from the state's own needs. I talked to her about her plans for the office if elected. And with us now is the Democratic candidate for Attorney General, Destiny Wells. Destiny, welcome back to the show.
Happy to be here, Garrett.
Why are you running for Attorney General?
I have worked in that office. You know, when I came back home from Afghanistan, I wanted to find a position in state government where I could take my leadership skills and serve the state of Indiana. And I worked there under Curtis Hill. I loved my time there, but it was obvious that we needed some new leadership. And, you know, I didn't think it could get worse than Curtis, but unfortunately, Indiana has found itself under the leadership of Todd Rokita, and I believe it's time for a change.
Housing's become a major issue in this election. Given Indiana's weak tenant protection laws, what would you do on that if elected?
Yeah, everywhere I'm going on the campaign trail, I am hearing, particularly from tenants. Tenants don't know where to turn when they are having problems with their landlords. Like you said, we are one of the weakest states. We are one of 5 states where if a tenant has an issue, they can't put their money into escrow while they battle that out through the courts. And so what we want to be able to do is advise the legislature going into this next session how to improve the law for tenants. We're also looking at a market where we're making it more difficult for Indiana home buyers, right? We have these large corporations from out of state coming into Indiana, especially Indianapolis, scooping up housing and then renting it out so that our own citizenry can't afford housing. There are a lot of issues to tackle when it comes to affordable housing, and that touches pretty much every Hoosier, doesn't it? From renting to home owning. So we will be taking that head on.
You said that you would redirect the office's resources toward labor trafficking and wage theft. How would that look on the ground?
Right, so statutorily, the Indiana Attorney General's office has the authority to look at trafficking, to investigate trafficking. That was stood up primarily under Zeller, and it has, and then it was strengthened under Hill, but Todd Rokita has not focused on it so much. And so with labor trafficking, what we're talking about is we are talking about people, most likely immigrants who are being trafficked to different types of jobs and undercutting our hardworking union jobs. So what we want to do is we want to model off of other states and start what we are going to call the Workers' Rights Task Force, where we are looking at crimes like wage theft, like worker misclass, because the Indiana Attorney General's office has not ever been reimagined since Right to Work. We have made these huge shifts in the law under a supermajority Republican government, but then we've done nothing to shore up the needs of Hoosiers. We are talking about making this office the people's attorney. Yes, we do represent the government. Yes, we do advise the legislature, but why have we lost focus on Hoosiers?
You've called for a children's Bill of Rights. What would that look like?
When we are having these conversations about what the future of education looks like, it's just like what I just said about the housing issue, right? When we change the law, we end up having different issues that are affecting everyday Hoosiers. We have some of the weakest compulsory education laws in the country. Now, we have really great homeschooling parents, right? We want people to be able to educate their child how they see fit. What we don't want is we don't want people on the fringe who are battling mental illness, drug issues, issues, taking their children out of school and then saying they're being educated. When I worked in my hometown in Martinsville, Indiana, and where I really started to learn my community and the issues that face Hoosiers, I saw a lot of children that were dropping off of the radar, right? Because they were being abused and they were saying they were being homeschooled. In fact, we brought some children into court and we found 7 and 8 year olds who could not read, they could not count, they did not know their colors. And then what you have is you have these unsocialized children who are going to turn the age of 18 and they're going to go immediately on Social Security. We have to start looking at the root causes of why we have the issues we do. And a lot of that is because of 15, 20 years of supermajority Republican laws coming out of the legislature. The Indiana Attorney General's, one of the roles is to advise the legislature, and we are going to make sure that we pull all these issues out of the shadows and start to also make the public aware of why they're seeing the problems that they are seeing. Remember, these kids are going to go back into school with your kids, right? If you're in public school, they're going to hold everybody behind, and we want the best for all children.
How do you thread that needle, though, between addressing the needs of the children you just described, where their parents are facing mental illness, substance abuse, that sort of thing, and the parents who genuinely want to homeschool their children and might not necessarily have those issues you described?
Well, if you're doing the right thing, Garrett, then why are you going to be looked at, right? This is children that I see clients come into the law offices and they say, look, I have a child who I share custody with my child's mother who has a drug addiction problem. Those cases are actually very hard to get in front of a judge because it needs to stem from a complaint with DCS. I am under no circumstances wanting to be proactive and to reach into good homeschooling parents' territory in that regard. We have the laws on the books, right? We have felony educational neglect in the state of Indiana. And if you look from county to county, it is not being prosecuted because there aren't enough resources. It's our job to help save the most vulnerable. That's what we are going to be there for. We are not going to infringe on a person's right to teach their child how they see fit.
You've been an outspoken critic of Indiana's abortion ban, and as you've alluded to, one of the jobs of the Attorney General is to defend the state in civil and criminal litigation. Would you defend the state's abortion ban in court absent any changes by the legislature? Until
we hear from the Supreme Court of the United States that this law is unconstitutional, there's a bit of a balance there, right? You have to defend the laws and uphold the rule of law. And when you know if a law is illegal, right? If I know something's been found by the Supreme Court to be illegal here in Indiana, we're not going to waste resources trying to defend that. However, we are in a position right now in the United States where women's rights are being undercut even up to the Supreme Court of the land. What I want to do is to make sure that we're not abusing our authority, right? Well, we will defend the laws as they come, but we're not going to exceed our authority, scare doctors, chill medical care. If you look across Indiana, we are losing doctors. It's not just about abortion anymore. It's also about healthcare deserts. OBGYNs at large do not want to practice here. We just had a death of a woman in northeast Indiana because she couldn't find proper OB care in time. Those are the issues where we're not going to exceed our authority.
Does the Attorney General's office have enough people to do some of the things you want to do?
Yeah, it's going to take a shift in priorities, right? I come from a military background, the federal government. We never have enough. I mean, especially in a combat theater, you never have enough resources. And so it's up to really good leadership to make sure they are collaborating across the agencies, to make sure that they are listening to the people's needs and that they are prioritizing their efforts as they see fit. There's never, like I said, enough resources. And people don't want to see their tax dollars wasted, right? So it will take a reprioritization. And we're going to make sure, Todd Rokita is in a lot of areas that he shouldn't be. We're going to pull back on infringing on education. We're going to get rid of the Eyes on Education portal where we try to scare teachers, right? And so when we are able to get out of those national partisan fights that Todd seems to love, those culture wars, we're going to have more resources to use.
I want to clarify. So you said you would shut down that portal?
Absolutely. That portal is completely antithetical to how the rule of law is supposed to work, right? You're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. That portal is something out of the Red Scare where anybody can blame somebody. They can put something about a teacher online. It could be not true. And Todd's position is you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent, and even when you prove yourself innocent, I'm not taking it off the portal. I find that whole portal is just abhorrent conduct by the chief legal officer of Indiana.
What do you say then to parents who might say, well, what else do I do if I'm concerned about some of the conduct of my child's teacher or the things they're learning in class, though?
Do you really need to go to the chief legal officer and put it on a website? We are using the extremes to make parents scared. We are preying upon the vulnerabilities of parents. I'm a mother myself. And we have to be ethical. We have to be responsible. And so there are avenues that parents can use. I mean, they have an entire local administration with their public educators, right? Their local administration. Skipping the chain and going straight to the chief legal officer and putting something on a website is not going to fix our problems. It's going to be something that requires more collaboration. And if that requires the Attorney General getting involved, then we'll get involved, but it'll be incrementally. It will not be this campaign platform that Todd has created out of education. I mean, let's be honest, Todd has people in his office, attorneys who are running for school board on far right platforms. Let's just call it what it is.
Right now, Indiana has 4 people on death row who have exhausted their appeals. Rokita has secured an execution date for one of them. He has requested one for a second. If you are elected, would you seek execution dates for the other 2?
Well, so I formerly represented the Indiana Department of Correction when I was in the Attorney General's office as a deputy. We're going to have an administration shift, right, from Governor Holcomb. Of course, I hope to Governor McCormick. So those will be decisions that we'll be making when we have a new governor. That execution date that's been set in December is something that obviously was tried to be done under this administration, and that's the business of the AG under this governorship.
Would you sue Donald Trump over his policy actions if he wins a second term?
Well, what policy actions?
Well, case in point, let's say he decides to follow through on his threat to conduct mass deportation operations or something like that. Or, he said, I would not be a dictator except for day one, that sort of thing. Would you take legal action?
Well, so let's go back to what the duties are of the Indiana Attorney General, right? They are to defend the state under any constitutional challenges. So if the state of Indiana and the office feels that Donald Trump is violating the Constitution, then I suppose that we probably would entertain the idea of probably filing a friend of the court brief if we need to, what our opinion is, right, on any standing litigation, or just look at that case as it comes. We've already been here before, right? We've seen Todd Rokita go after Joe Biden, the President Biden, multiple times, a lot. Again, it's a prioritization of resources in the office. You're never going to have enough resources to do what you want. Sometimes Indiana is not the best to lead the charge. I would argue that Todd Rokita has Indiana on multiple cases where we are not best equipped to lead the charge. The same thought process would go into a Democratic Attorney General under a Republican president if that was to occur.
Is it the job of the Attorney General of the state of Indiana to sue the President of the United States over policies the Attorney General disagrees with? I
would argue that no, it's not always the job. Again, it's Garrett, it is not a yes or no answer. It is a case-by-case basis. I argue all the time that the Indiana Attorney General is involved in litigation that he shouldn't be, right? Climate policy in California, for example, who's best to deal with that? Neighboring states that are opposed or Indiana? Border issues, is Indiana resourced to be leading the charge, or is it a Republican state like Texas? So again, it's a case-by-case basis. If the Constitution is being violated, Garrett, then yes, it is subject to litigation.
What makes you the best choice in this race?
I have been preparing for this since I was 19, right? I enlisted in the military when I was 19. I continue to serve. I have had the best training in the world when it comes to leadership. Not only have I had the best training with our Army Command and General Staff College, I've taught it myself. And so, when I found myself in Afghanistan during the 2016 presidential transition, I said, wow, I really want to do this more because I got to see that policy was affecting what we were doing across the world. And so when I came home, I was very intentional about setting this track for myself. And, we ran once, we learned a lot, and I know that we are the best equipped to run that agency. It needs a fresh look, and I'm ready to take it on.
That was Destiny Wells, Democratic candidate for Attorney General. Remember, you can catch All Indiana Politics every Sunday morning at 9:30, only on Wish TV. I'm Garrett Bergquist. Thanks for listening.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.